myself, I'm made well and taste. I've been around for a long, long year. So many a man's soul and faith. I was around when Jesus Christ had his moment of doubt and pain. Made damn sure that Pilate washed his hands, sealed his fate. Pleased to meet you. Hope you guess my name. Oh yeah. But what's puzzling you is just the nature of my game. Stuck around St. Petersburg when I saw it was the time for a change. Killed the Tsar and his ministers. Anastasia screamed in vain. I rode a tank, had a generous rank. I went to blitzkrieg rage and the bodies stank. Pleased to meet you. Hope you guess my name. Ah yeah. But what's confusing you is just the nature of my game. I watch for glee while your kings and queens fall for 10 decades. For the God save me, I shouted out, Gail of Kennedy. Well, after all, it was you and me. So let me please introduce myself. I'm a man of wealth and taste. And I'll lead track for troubadours who get here before they reach Bombay. Pleased to meet you. Hope you guess my name. Ah, yeah. But what's buzzing you is just the nature of my game. Ah, yeah. I get down with it. Ah, yeah. Ah, yeah. Bye-bye.
In Judaism, human beings are not inherently good. Human beings have what's called the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer HaTov. They have a bad desire and a good desire. Those are at war with each other at all times, and it's your job to empower the good desire to overcome the bad desire. That in Catholicism, there is this idea from Aquinas that human beings are made in the image of God.
I think it's a little bit more complicated than that.
Yeah. Ian Hussein, Neil Ferguson, Russell Brand, Joe Rogan, Douglas
Joe Rogan. What are you doing with Joe Rogan?
Oh well, Joe's already he's got a foot in the camp of hedonism or totalitarianism at the drop of a bloody hat, and that's happened. It's happening now. It sweeps the campuses. They're the admirers of Hamas. Brutal. The sweep of hedonistic pride. The clarion call of the Marxists. It's like there's the humanism for you.
And Netanyahu demanded that the protests against Israel be stopped. The U.S. government complied because our members of Congress have all been bought and paid for with tax dollars given to the American Israeli Political Action Committee, known as AIPAC. AIPAC openly brags about this on their official website because they don't have to register under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, which requires agents of foreign principals to register and provide transparency. Beginning in 1962, they were known as the American Zionist Council, and President John F. Kennedy was ordering them to register as a foreign agent. Along with members of the U.S. government, the Zionists fought against this. In October of 1963, forms were prepared for them to register, but the next month, JFK was assassinated, and Israel has never been asked to register since. 4 years later, Israel attacked the USS Liberty, murdering dozens of Americans and injuring over 100. The U.S. government helped them cover it up as an accident. On the day of 9/11, 5 Israelis who were seen photographing the collapse of the Twin Towers and celebrating were arrested and detained for several weeks. In documents later released by FOIA requests, The FBI redacted their faces in pictures where they were posing in front of the burning towers and described them as being happy and jovial. One of them stated, "Israel now has hope that the world will understand us." The end of the declassified document asks if they had foreknowledge of the event and were there to film it, and the answer was redacted. As soon as they were released, they returned to Israel and went on television, where they confirmed that the answer was yes.
The fact of the matter is, we are coming from a country that experiences terror daily. Our purpose was to document the event.
The dancing Israelis had fake student IDs, and several accounts of suspicious Israeli art students were reported to be infiltrating government buildings. Over 100 of these Israeli art students were arrested. Fox News reported that these art students served in military intelligence and explosive ordnance units.
The majority of those questioned, quote, stated they served in military intelligence, electronic surveillance intercept, and/or explosive ordnance units.
In March of 2000, several of these Mossad art students were living in the World Trade Center as part of the World Views Artist in Residence program. They occupied floors 90 and 91, where walls were unfinished and structural beams were exposed. A member of this group of artists, Hanan Sarfati, was arrested by the DEA as part of the Israeli spy ring. But the identities of an additional 14 Israelis who were with him have never been released to the public. These Israeli artists were sharing the space with a group of Austrian artists known as Gelatin, who were working on a project called The Bee Thing that involved removing windows on the 91st floor of the North Tower. A small balcony was constructed for people to stand on while photographs were taken by a helicopter. Another group called E-Team managed the helicopter with the designation number N666LH. This helicopter was to be in an art exhibit memorializing this project scheduled for September 11th, 2001. In March of 2001, E-Team had an art project called 127 Windows. Officially, they were going to write their name on the exterior of the tower. They had an artist's rendering of what the project was supposed to look like, but it never appears to have happened. And on 9/11, American Airlines Flight 11 crashed into the exact spot where they were supposedly preparing to do this. In 2001, Gelatin published a book on the project and described it as conspiratorial work. It includes a drawing of someone falling headfirst from the 91st floor with the words, 300 meters of pure pleasure. Gelatin was originally spelled the same as the explosives, but was officially changed in 2005. And the 9/11 Commission report does not mention Gelatin, E-Team, or any of the Israeli Mossad art students.
All right. Tell me, baby, what's my name? What's my name? Won't you tell me, baby? What's my name? I want you to tell me, sweetie. Hey, y'all, come on, name. Won't you tell me, baby? What's my name? Won't you tell me, sweetie? Y'all, come on, right?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dr. Deep State. Before I introduce our guest today, I want to do a quick introduction. That video there was from way back in the day, sympathy for we will call it the synagogue. This is something Will and I are going to be working on for some time to come. Crazy stuff. You know what comes to my mind when I see that video? It's the culmination of the Tavistock Institute over there in the city of London and the Laurel Canyon. So quickly, if you've never heard of either of these, the Tavistock was created through the city of London, and it was designed to basically what we call socially engineer the hearts and minds of people after what Vendée Radio would call the suicide of the West during the First World War. And they've been on it in different guises ever since. And again, a Laurel Canyon, if you've never heard of this, you can PDF Dave McGowan's book, Crazy Times there at Laurel Canyon, where pretty much all the social engineering that came out of this modern music scene was from the military industrial complex in coordination with Tavistock. So A lot of stuff going on there. I remember, I'm not that old, but when I was a kid, those songs were on, and I always remember it made me want to be kind of a little bit devilish in my mind. But yeah, these young rock and rollers, I guess when they weren't doing drugs and getting laid and being on tour, they were able to piece together a great cosmic conspiracy down to the wire. And I suppose they had somebody whispering in their ear at that time. And what we're going to suggest is from the time of Pilate to the Kennedys and beyond, we can fill in what the Bible provides for us is the synagogue, and we can start speaking about that a little more plainly. But before we go on any further, here's what's going on. I do want to anybody that's new over here, I want to say at the top of the page, and I'll put it in the links, the two books which speak to the totality of this show over the last 7 years are Seeing Through the Singularity. It's now 4 years old in the current book. In Pursuit of the Metaverse, the links will be down below. And guess what? 7 years of doing information like this, as I always say, pushing a boulder up a hill against all of the currents. There's never been an ad on here, and there's never been an opportunity for people to donate. So guess what? Anybody that wants to do that, I will leave a link in the description, and there's also going to be one right up there at the top. And in addition, we're making all the transitions over to local. For some crazy reason, there is a window of opportunity where content like this is still available to go up, but we don't know how long it is. I'm going to do my intro video over there. In the meantime, anybody that wants to sign up, please go do. And the membership will be transferring over there in the next few weeks and beyond. But I want to put my time. I had to make a decision. Do I want to keep doing this? Because it can be kind of thankless, frankly, after 7 years. But the tides are turning, and there's little things. There's people that pop up in the world, voices of truth. And even, like I said, LifeSite News is now talking about these things that we've been talking about for so long, the Mashiach and the preparation for it. And once you start putting all the crazy events in the world toward what if it is the synagogue preparing everything that connects everything from the shot to the borders to the wars, then stuff starts to kind of make sense. And why do we do all this? Well, as Plato says, when we accept a lie, we become enchanted. In other words, we take these demonic interdimensional spirits into us, and we start going along with the egregore. And the egregore is framing in our society right now in preparation for this new age. And unfortunately, within the Christian community, within the Catholic Christian community, within the traditional Catholic, we see kind of the framing of a preparation for sort of a new church, frankly. And I will submit that the 2 or 3 characteristics are these are people that are going to slowly accept process theology, this bizarre mixture of evolution science and the supernatural creation. And secondly, they're going to fail here to see that what's going on in the Vatican and how it's cooked up with the World Economic Forum and stuff like that. They can only apologize this for so long before some of us are going to say, wait a minute, there's a problem here. There's an apostate church forming. And number 3, that links these all together, those who fail to see the synagogue. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Because I mentioned a few weeks ago to y'all that there's going to be a time here in the very near future, you're going to see an increasing divergence. They're going to roll out. I'm not saying they got the memo. It doesn't matter. We're looking at ideas. But increasingly, academics are going to come out and say it's anything but the synagogue. And if it is a little bit over here, there's going to be a little wacky magic mind trick. In a sense, what they're going to say to us is don't get monocausal, don't go there. In fact, love the synagogue. Forget the 1950 years of history. Love the synagogue. So some of the people that are supposed to be the best and the brightest are going to tell us that. And you know what? You don't have to be a rocket scientist to break apart their arguments. And we're going to start doing that today with one of them. And what we're going to do also, and Will and our guest today that I'm going to introduce just a second, the Catholic State, are going to show you their little rhetorical bag of tricks that they use. They've been using it a lot, but they're going to use it in their articles, how to spot those things. And not only their sophistry, but just their exact tricks that they're going to use. It's like, yes, over here. And then here's the mind whammy, but don't go there with your mind. And so we're going to get into that, and Will and I are going to work on this thing called sympathy for the synagogue, because I guess that's what Catholic influencers want us to have right now. So, Justin, I'm sorry, Catholic State guy, are you with us in the house? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
I can. We got you on. So, Catholic State guy has been going over a lot of the documents over and over and over. And on his own channel, that if he wants us to plug it, we can do that. He has, whenever something comes up with these influencers and they try to get with the secular people or groove with the synagogue there and try to twist reality, that's what In Pursuit of the Metaverse is always about, preserving reality. When they try to twist reality, people like Catholic State are there to go, wait a minute, let's square that with 1950 years. And he'll go century after century after century. So Will has pulled out a document in particular today, and it's just a good example of things to look out for in terms of rhetorical devices and sophistry that's used in general. My hunch is the majority of influencer lands will not only look the other way, as they did in 9/11, in COVID, in the Ukraine, in the slaughter going on right now, but they're going to say, embrace it, feel the love, okay? And so we're going to start picking that apart. And again, I want to say, if anything with the video, for some reason, boom, everything disappears, Dr. Deep State on Local is where we'll be from here on in. So without any further ado, Mr. Will Tucker, by the way, I'll take a little credit for some of the conceptual parts, but Will did a lot of work there, as per usual, putting that introduction together. Some of it you might have to hit pause and go over there because there's some dense information in there. Will Tucker, how are you doing today, my friend?
Doing very well, Doug. Thank you for that intro. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation with the Catholic State. He's someone we've followed for over a year now. I enjoy his content, his dissection of these issues around the adversus Judaeos doctrines of the church, and holding accountable various voices within the influencer world, as you already addressed. So today we want to look at this article by that the Catholic State recently did a dissection of on his channel by Dr. Alan Phimister, called "What Should a Catholic Think About the Israeli-Palestinian Conflict?" And this article, we're going to kind of go through and read some various sections from it and compare it to what church teaching has been, and try to identify strategies and techniques in which these, Judaized Catholic voices are utilizing in order to twist reality, as you just said. So, Dr. Alan Phimister is not someone to be taken lightly. He's very intelligent, doctor and professor of dogmatic theology. So, and then I want to hold this and compare it to a document that I've referenced before by Pope Benedict XVI called "Grace and Vocation Without Remorse," which kind of lays out this sort of crypto dual covenant theology, masquerading as a kind of post-Vatican II nouveau theology that's distinct without really a difference from Protestant, just on its surface, dual covenant theology. So we'll
real quick, Will. What
Sure.
we're doing here generally, Will is a smart guy. He's not claiming to be a theologian, but just with his basic intelligence, he can blow this thing out of the water. But what we do here at Dr. Deep State, when we tend to be influenced by these people because they know canon law or something like that, the wholeness of reality, we need to consider seriously, what is the tradition? What is sacred scripture? How do we interpret these things? But what I do in Dr. Deep State is we also have to not realize that we're not wrenching these texts out of reality themselves. They come in a real world situation, and that's what Dr. Deep State is about. How do they square with the rest of reality? If we can look at these things and not see other patterns in the world, we can be ripe for falling into the egregore, the ape of the church, an artificial reality that's being framed all around us. Sorry about that, Will. Please go ahead.
That's great. And one of the beauties of being a Catholic is that we don't have to rely on our own sort of innovative readings of Scripture in order to understand the truths of the faith. And this is something that the Catholic State pointed out in, I think, a recent video he did on, maybe it's on Michael Lofton, in which he talked about how magisterium, we have a three-legged stool within Catholicism, in which there's Scripture, tradition, and magisterium. And all three of those things sort of hold up the doctrines of the faith. So we have to keep all those in mind. And those are always presumed within, whenever we're reading, a magisterial document, it's already informed by what the doctors have already taught, what the fathers have already taught. And it's presumed that precedent is already established. So anyway, with the Catholic State here, I'm going to share this screen, Doug. So look for that right now, and we'll start digging into this article. So what I hope to do is kind of present this section by section. And this is the one I want to share here. The other document, please, Doug. There it is. Yes, great. Okay, so bear with me as I try to navigate this. This is a little bit new on this platform. But what I hope to do is, like I said, go through each section and kind of present the problematic areas here, try to identify deceptions, and also ask the Catholic State to sort of provide references to church tradition and writings by the fathers that contradict what's being presented here. So we've got this article, What Should a Catholic Think About the Israeli-Palestinian Conflict by Dr. Alan Phimister. So, we're in the midst of the conflict in Gaza, Rafah now, in which, mass casualties. We're having refugee camps bombed, hospitals. We're getting footage of horrific images of children decapitated, as we've shared on here already. And this is what sort of a mainstream voice in the Catholic Church, who is thought of as a traditionalist, has to say about it. So he starts off by saying, the Jews no longer possess a right in divine law to the Holy Land, or if they do, is suspended until such a time as they recognize the Messiah, and so reverse the corporate acts associated with the Passion. They will, of course, eventually do this, but at the point, it will be academic, as it will trigger the end of the world. So I agree with most of what's being said here, but the very first point he makes, I think, is already misframing the issue, in which it says the Jews no longer possess a divine right to the Holy Land. And so there's this play between divine law and natural law that I think Phimister is exploiting here, so we're in the secular age now, in which we no longer live under Christendom, so we have to kind of defer to natural law. So within this framework, and this is something that Pope Benedict uses as well, the Jews have a right to the Holy Land under natural law. So to say that they have a right, they do not have a right to the divine law, is not going far enough. It's not just that they don't have a right, it's that there's a divine mandate that they are expelled from the Holy Land, that they are not to have any sort of corporate or national jurisdiction over the Holy Land. They're to be in a state of exile until the end of the world. And any effort to undo that is illicit and must be rejected by the church. And so the kind of gymnastics that Dr. Phimister here undergoes is a way in which it twists reality, and so that we don't recognize that fundamental truth, which is basic to the New Testament, to this idea of who is the synagogue of Satan and who are we yoking ourselves to. So the Catholic State, there was an excellent quote that you included in your recent presentation from St. John Chrysostom about yoking ourselves to the synagogue. Could you go over that for us?
I most happily will. So this is from St. John Chrysostom, his 6th homily against the Jews. He actually has 8 homilies against the Jews. But anyways, in his 6th homily, he says this, quote, "Why are the Jews degenerate? Because of their hateful assassination of Christ. This supreme crime lies at the root of their degradation and woes. The rejection and the dispersion of the Jews was the work of God, and because of his absolute abandonment of the Jews. Thus, the Jew will live under the yoke of slavery without end. God hates the Jews, and on Judgment Day, he will say to those who sympathize with them, 'Depart from me, for you have had doings with my murderers, unquote.
Can I butt in real quick? A quick comment. Sometimes I can't help myself. I'll do this. So a lot of Catholics like to say, there's people coming into the church and the apologists and all that, and they all read the church fathers. And once you read, deep in history, you become Catholic, and that's all true and beautiful. However, when you start cherry picking, it's like, ooh, that St. John there, he's a little too edgy there, so we just forget about him. Right?
Yeah.
Like a video I saw the other day about Maximilian Kolbe. We like to remember some things. Father Fahey would like to remember some things, but we conveniently forget the things that are going to bring trouble on us, like they brought trouble on Maximilian Kolbe. And he was a martyr for that reason. And, he dared to talk about things like the protocols. And so did Father Fahey. And I've never heard anybody mention that. Never heard.
I have.
Well, you have. And that's why I favor it so much in the final chapter of In Pursuit. I do the best, I think, of his 6 books and Father Fahey's, and bring in the conspiracy of the synagogue into it. But here's what I'm saying. So when people like to cherry pick, we go back. That's what Protestants do. Like they'll have a rapture document or philosophy or something like that, and they'll cherry pick, that's what Calvin did, cherry pick from the fathers. That's a type of rape, frankly, of the Catholic Church. The Protestants are famous for just pillaging the body, picking the pockets of what you like and going with your own show. So when Catholics start doing that or continue doing that, because they've been doing it a long time now, for half a century or more, that's what an egregore is. That's what the ape is that part that you conveniently, because it doesn't work on the algorithms, you're not being able to bro it up with the other wannabe celebrities out there and so forth. Sorry, keep it real. That you're generating the egregore. It's the demonic thought form. It's because that's exactly what second realities are. It's the part that you forget that frames the rest of it. It's the foot in the door for process theology. It's the foot in the door to look the other way and not see the lack of continuity, the conspiracy in the papacy. And ultimately, you're not able to see what God clearly laid out for us, which is the conspiracy of the synagogue against God and man, and how that's going to be used to prepare the world for the Mashiach. And that's what we're living in. And I'm sorry to go on and on and on, but I just have to get that off. So when we talk about the fathers, what we're going to do here is talk about them in their fullness. And that's going to include things that to our modern politically correct / socialist communist ears is going to make us uncomfortable. Okay, so I don't know who was talking, Catholic State or Will Tucker. I'm going to shut up for a moment.
Yeah, an excellent point you were making the other day, Doug, when we were on the phone. You were talking about how these influencers can identify the synagogue of Satan as anyone or as any group, except for the most obvious group, which is, organized collective Jewry of today.
Right.
So it could be the Muslims. It could be us, bad Catholics. It could be the Protestants. It could be the Masons. It could be the globalists. But it can't be the obvious inheritors of the curse of the passion. And so, moving on, I want to share this.
I'll tell you, sorry, I got it, but it's just like the lyrics there. Who killed the Kennedys? Mm-hmm. After all, it was you and me. Yeah, our sin is always part of the show. But why did God, especially in the book of the Apocalypse, tell us about the synagogue of Satan? Because that completes everything from the beginning, the first prophecy of the Bible, the seed of the serpent, until where we're at now. And when we cannot identify the enmity, don't sit and black pill us about everything going on in the world and the church if you're not willing to address it because of our lack of ability, strength, fortitude, courage, whatever it takes. I'm not bragging over his. I'm just saying that's why it's happening to us. These
Amen
are the people
that
are trying. Yeah, thank you. They're trying to break the restraint. We are the restrainers. Our truth is the restrainer. Every time we lie and look the other way, we are enchanting our minds and our worlds. We're not participating in the martyrdom of the saints, like Saint Stephen, who said, "You killed our Lord and Savior." The Jews. Okay, sorry to be so
And St. Stephen
I know
wasn't
it's
just
hard for some people's ears to hear. Go ahead, Will.
yeah, and St. Stephen wasn't just standing there pointing to, oh, those of you in the crowd here who were actually there on Calvary that day. No, you collectively who don't accept Christ, who are a part of corporate Jewry, organized Jewry, you are the inheritors of this guilt. So I want to move forward a little bit here to the next section, Doug, if we can share that screen again.
Yeah.
So he says, none of this means that the Jews do not have the same rights as everyone else in natural law to national existence and security. So here's a sort of semantic game that he's playing between national existence and security and the right to a state. So if you push him on this, you say, well, you're saying that by natural law, they have a right to have a physical state in the Holy Land. He said, no, I never said that. And you're just conflating terms, but he's leading us in this direction in which we have to accept this argument that they have according to natural law, that they have a right to land,
Right.
and thus denying that the church teaching that they should be in a state of exile until the end of time or until they accept Christ as Messiah. It has been a perennial teaching of the church. So he goes on to say, undoubtedly, the many tribulations they have experienced over the last 2 millennia issue from the rejection of the Messiah. True. But that does not excuse the fault of those Christians and others, so putting the blame onto us, who inflicted them. Nor does it mean that they can be crudely said to be deserved any more than a child dying of cancer deserves to do so because of the sin of Adam. So here's another technique that they use. There's no collective guilt. We can't say that the Jews of today are guilty of the same sin of the Jews that were present, calling crucify him. But there is collective suffering. There is corporate suffering in which the Jews of today still are victims of the Holocaust and still are due alms by the rest of the Gentile world because of their collective suffering over the ages and because of the expulsions. Don't ask questions about the expulsions or why they happened, but just remember the collective suffering. And
that's what, for 7 years I've been going, that's what Carl Schmitt is saying in the state of exception. When we fail to see that they can be an exception to their own rules, they transcend in a devilish way the law and become the law. And that's what they're moving. The communist state is about worshiping the law, who are the masters of that economy. The capitalist state, the same thing. So when we don't call them out, you're giving your sovereignty, not to Christ the King, but the people you're scared to put a finger on. And there's always been a cost associated with that. Well, at least since the Renaissance. But anyway, go ahead, Will.
Well, before you move on, one point, if I may, this point he's making is unbiblical as well. It is the case that God does allow people to be cursed, whole bloodlines to be cursed. I mean, like, original sin is essentially a curse, right? We are all guilty of original sin. That guilt is transferred through from our original parents, Adam and Eve, to all of us. Similarly, with it, like throughout the Old Testament, Cain was cursed, so were his descendants. Same with Ham. Ham himself wasn't cursed, but it was his son Canaan, and they're in his descendants, right? So this idea of that Jews can't be cursed, this is another just huge error against the faith. This idea that whole people can't be cursed because of the sins of their fathers is just horrendously stupid. It's always been the case that God can curse whole peoples. I mean, it's just. But go on. I just wanted to make that point.
Do you have that Cornelius Lapide quote that we were talking about the other day handy? Could you unpack that for us if you have it? If you don't,
I don't have it right now. I can pull it up real quick on the.
I'll read it.
It's basically just exegesis of Matthew 27:25. I mean, he says, let the guilt. Yeah, I'm reading it now. He says regarding Matthew 27:25, where it says, "Then answered all the people and said, His blood be upon us and our children." Lapide says, "Let the guilt thou fearest be transferred from thee to us. If there be any guilt, may we and our posterity atone for it. But he's talking about, when he says we, he's talking about the Jews, do not acknowledge any guilt. And consequently, as not fearing any punishment, we boldly call it down on ourselves, and thus have subjected not only themselves, but their very latest descendants, again, all the Jews, to God's displeasure. They feel it indeed even to this day in its full force. And this is, Cornelius Lapide lived in the 17th century. So, like, it's this, and like you see this with all the fathers, going back to the point Doug was making earlier. It's virtually, and if you watch my videos or read my articles, you'll see me show virtually all the fathers from the 2nd century, like, and we're talking about all the way back to Ignatius of Antioch, who was the disciple of St. John, all the way up to the early 20th century, all this, like up to Maximilian Kolbe, even saying the same thing, that the Jews were cursed for killing Christ, and they don't make any distinctions like it's a particular set of Jews, but they just say the Jews, right? These distinctions that people make, like Trent Horn make, are distinctions that have never been made in the history of Catholicism until the advent of modernism in the 20th century.
Yeah, that was one of the strategies I wanted to identify later on if we get to it. But that Phimister uses here, he says, well, after the Haskalah, which is like the Jewish Enlightenment of the 19th century, we have, Zionism is largely a secular Jewish movement that has to be distinguished from, Orthodox observance. And, so they created all this equivocation within the definition of what is a Jew and who is, so that it can clear the space for a theocratic nation to be established in the Holy Land and the utter blasphemy that represents. So they say, well, actually, this is a secular movement, so we can support them in their right to natural law and to natural borders, and even though we can't defend our own. But that's another point. And then in this quote, Lapide goes on to say that the curse is in full force today, and they're being scattered all over the world without a city or a temple or a sacrifice or a priest or a prince, and being a subject race in all countries. So back to the St. John Chrysostom quote from earlier, they are in a state of slavery, spiritual slavery. They're the sons of the bondwoman, right? And that's how they fit typologically. So
can I bump in really quick?
Sure,
and
sure.
I know it's kind of a side thing because we're kind of getting into the text. We're doing wonderful. I just want to throw something novel at y'all. When I did my Mission Impossible video, I put an UNS link in there. UNS right now has done a couple of things. He's pulling together all the history and the blood testing. Now, I'm going to keep this as a spiritual curse, but I'm going to do this really quick. What is exciting that's being revealed right now that kind of brings together the Ashkenazis and the Sephardim in terms of the blood work and everything else, and I'm still calling this a spiritual thing. To understand the Bible, you have to understand this narrative that I began in saying through the singularity, the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman. The seed of the serpent is going from Cain. The next one, the Canaanites. Okay, here's the big deal that's being realized. We take all the historical evidence. The major conversion into Jewry was not the Khazars. It was the 1st and 2nd century BC. And it was from the Phoenicians who were conquered by the Hellenistic armies. They scattered and became Jews. Okay, and so that explains why they became the seafaring dominant power throughout the ancient world, the medieval world, and today. They are Canaanites. The Phoenicians that converted kept part of that faith. That's what makes a lot of sense about the Kabbalah. Yes, there's the Babylonian component as well, but until you kind of get that component, you're not going to get the totality of the Kabbalah and what's being worked out right now. You're not going to get abortion and child sacrifice and the necessity of torturing, not just killing the people over in the Middle East right now, but torturing them. Okay, so what's interesting about that is when you look at the book of Apocalypse, there's a lot of ways we could say of the two churches, one of which is in Philadelphia, those who claim they are Jews but are not, but do lie. They're Canaanites, okay? They're from that seed line, and they're pretending to be of the seed. Most of the genuine people of Jesus's lineage, whether they're in Galilee or Benjaminites or Judeans, were converted. They kind of had the ears to hear. That's an argument I'm just throwing in the picture. Now, to add to that, all of the historical evidence, all of the blood work points to the fact that the people living in Palestine today that are getting butchered are the most closely related to what would have been Jesus's authentic bloodline. Now, people can debate that and dispute it. But look at what Unz is bringing for evidence, and it's overwhelming. And so that's the great irony of our time when we talk about ears to hear. And bear in mind, Jesus said, what you do to the least of me. Think about who the least of people are, that even Catholics are spitting on these people. What you do to the least of me. And can you believe the people that sat there for 2,000 years that are still Christian and getting bombed? How much he must really love them. And can you open up your heart and mind to kind of see these things that have always been understood by the church up until very recently? I know I didn't need to go off on that whole thing, but I just really wanted us to kind of have a big typological view of why getting scripture, God's story to us, and where we're at right now, why it matters, and how we can start to pull in events in the Ukraine, in the Middle East, and our own borders, and the destruction of our own societies to make some kind of mongoloid race to serve them. That's what this is all about. The Tower of Babel that's on the front of the metaverse, that's what they're remaking. It's typological because God speaks to us through typology. He came with a sword to divide truth from error, and usually the people on the truth are going into the narrow gate. So this has always been a challenge, presenting this kind of information in a world that does not have ears. Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Will. I cut you off again.
Excellent. I love it. And we'll dial that back up again. There's a passage in here I think that directly addresses that about, that who are the descendants of Jacob, and this presumption that it's the Ashkenazim or these groups that could easily be, because we have in the book of Revelation, we have those who say they're Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. And then we have this idea of the mass conversion of the Jews. Perhaps it's the Palestinians who actually have Semitic blood who will be the ones who convert in the end times. Just throwing that out there, not saying that is for sure. But Lapide goes on to say, I want to juxtapose this quote he says here, in which he compares the guilt of the Jews for the passion to a child dying of cancer's guilt by original sin. So Lapide goes on to say, it was too in punishment for Christ's crucifixion that Titus ordered 500 Jews to be crucified every day at the siege of Jerusalem, as they crowded out of the city in search of food, so that at last there was no room for the crosses and no crosses for the bodies. This curse, says Jerome, rests on them even to this day, and the blood of the Lord is not taken away from them, as Daniel foretold. And so it's important that this fulfillment of the Old Testament prophecies about the destruction of the Jewish people and this seed of iniquity, and how in not accepting Christ, it attests to the reality of Christ's mission and the truth of his teaching, his fulfillment of messiahship. And so when we deny it, we say, well, the Jewish suffering is actually something that is it's an aberration. It's something that shouldn't happen. It's something that we have to do everything to prevent. Obviously, sicut Judaeus non, but it is a sign of their curse, and that is something that we should not, we should not see as something that is a sign of our own fault. So anyway, he goes on here, and this is another strategy I want to identify that Doug has talked about for years, is accidental history. So he goes on to say, the return of the Jews to the Holy Land and the recapture of Jerusalem in 7th of June, 1967, about the time that the Rolling Stones were releasing Sympathy for the Devil, is of immense importance in salvation history. Our Lord warned us, Luke 21:24, that this event would trigger the apostasies of the Gentiles, and so it has proved. Once again, that does not mean that the Jews are at fault for the apostasy of the Gentiles, just like they weren't at fault for the Reformation, just like they weren't at fault for the Enlightenment, just as they weren't at fault for the Bolshevik Revolution, just on and on and on. We can just replay the song again, right? So 1967, this is a great point that our friend Theo at Vendée Radio pointed out to me recently, is when we had the legalization of abortion, we had the Cultural Revolution, we had feminism, we had Summer of Love, we had Vatican II, right? So this massive, but it just accidentally happened at the same time as the 6-Day War, in which the Jews were given jurisdiction over Jerusalem as a city. So he's sort of tying it to the great apostasy of the Gentiles, but it's actually our fault. It's our fault. It's not something that, and it is to a certain extent, but he doesn't identify the Jews are not at fault, he says here explicitly, for the apostasy of the Gentiles, even though that's the inverse of what it says in Scripture, that we will be, by their pharmakia and by their deceptions, we will yoke ourselves to the synagogue of Satan. But do you have any thoughts there, Catholic State?
Yeah, I mean, he's all he does in this article is conflate a lot of things in. I mean, like from my understanding, his criticism of my response video was that he thought I was conflating state with nation, and then he was trying to make a distinction without difference that the state and nation are different. So my whole video, the Catholic state whole video, is just based on a false premise, but that's the premise he makes throughout this whole article is conflating state and nation. Yes, I know a state is like the physical territory, the space with boundaries of which a nation, which is a people, resides. I know that, and I think he probably knows that too, but he's conflating state and nations the whole time. Right there, he even says states are like parents, and he's essentially saying that the Jews are entitled to the state, which is against Catholic teaching, because all the church fathers have said because of their curse, the Jews are supposed to be dispersed. The Jews, or the Christians, even going back as early as St. Justin Martyr, who was in the 2nd century, like he died 150 AD. He even says in his dialogue with Trypho that the reason that the Jews are dispersed, which happened in 70 AD when Rome sacked Jerusalem. There was the Bar Kokhba revolt in the 2nd century, but like that was put down too. And the Jews have been dispersed until like the 20th century. But like even St. Justin Martyr said that these things, the dispersion, all these sufferings of the Jews have happened to them because of their rejection and murder of Christ. And this has been the Catholic teaching since the 2nd century, right? Virtually all the church fathers have said this. You're not going to find a church. I challenge anybody to find a church father that said the opposite. That one, I would really like to see somebody prove me wrong and say, look, this church father said the opposite, because I've never seen it, even after researching this a lot. But anyways, all the church fathers have said this, and even up to the Middle Ages, where Pope Innocent III and several papal bulls calls out the fact that the Jews are cursed and they're meant to be dispersed as slaves or servants under Christian nations because of their assassination, their deicide of Jesus Christ. And that's why when you look at the Third and Fourth Lateran Councils, the Fourth Lateran Council was under Innocent III. He says, like, that's why you have four specific canons against the Jews, like how they had to wear the yellow star and the hats, why they were deprived of being able to hold public office, why, and even later medieval and early modern popes, they deprived them of the rights to, have Christian servants. That was actually in the Third Lateran Council. They deprived them of a lot of social and civil rights because of the fact, and it all comes from the perennial church teaching that was held by all the church fathers and Christians up until the 20th century, that the Jews are meant to be placed under perpetual servitude in Christian nations without their own homeland because of killing Jesus Christ. Right. I don't even see how anybody can dispute this if they actually read any document that's written before the 20th century.
Right.
Catholic state. And what I'll say real quick is, remember what we're doing here. We're trying to preserve the hermeneutic of continuity.
Absolutely. They're modernists.
They're modernists.
This is the heresy of modernism. This is the heresy of modernism, folks.
Telling you something that's in contradiction is a continuity. They're telling you that's what they're doing. And we're not doing anything. We're just simply giving you the continuity, the hermeneutic of continuity. And yet the rock stars of Catholic influencer world are again trying to tell you something that is and is not. And that's the mind whammy, that essentially what they're doing is entering your door into accepting dual covenant theology, which is another way of saying prepare your mind and soul for the Mashiach.
Absolutely. That's the bottom line, folks, is they're trying to get us to embrace dual covenant theology, which is, again, is a heresy. That is a heresy with a capital H, because it is extra ecclesiam nullius salus is a dogma of the church. And if you look at the Council of Florence, and I've read this in my videos, and I could read it again, but it explicitly says that the church believes, defines, declares that all peoples outside of the Catholic Church, and it explicitly names the Jews, Muslims, pagans, heretics, schismatics, but the Jews explicitly, it says if they're not reconciled with the Catholic Church before they died, they will go to hell. It says it very explicitly in the Council of Florence, and this is universal magisterium, folks. This is magisterium. This is the Pope in communion with all the bishops of the Catholic Church, defining and declaring this as Catholic teaching. So if you do not believe this and you believe in dual covenant theology, you assent to heresy. That's pretty serious.
And one more thing I'm going to throw in really quickly. All these Pope splainers and just everybody, they make this assumption when they're saying the Jews or whatever they think their theology is, they're working from this assumption, not only just of accidental history, but that they hold a theology that's the same as it was in the ancient world. And it's not. All of them, anybody in power, anybody, and not more than 99%, they're Kabbalistic, Talmudic Kabbalistic Jews, means they simultaneously worship the God of Revelation and his negation, Satan. They do it both. And you can go through document after document. They're more interested in the form of if you turn the cup this way, than if you're serving by twisting the cup, if you're serving God or Satan. So what we're saying here is, part of the reason I think people don't want to know Kabbalah is it's Satanism. So these people are telling us to embrace Satanism, for God's sakes, because we've given ourselves so over to the information of the world and just so used to that's just how things roll. You bro it up. And anyway, go ahead, Will. I'm going to let you keep.
Yeah, you're right. And there's one stable throughout the entire tradition. There's one stable definition of Jew. Whenever they talk about the Jews, everybody knows what they mean. And it's not until Vatican II that we start having these different stratifications of, who the Jews are, which Jews are we talking about, and needing to contextualize it. And then the only proof text Dr. Phimister provides here prior to Vatican II that doesn't, restate the collective guilt is this one here. Doug, if you can bring it back up, it's from the Catechism of the Council of Trent, which he says, in this guilt are involved all those who fall frequently into sin. For as our sins consign Christ the Lord to the death of the cross, most certainly those who wallow in sin and iniquity crucify to themselves again the sin of God as in them lies, and make a mockery of him. This guilt seems more enormous in us than in the Jews, since according to the testimony of the same apostle, they had known it, they would never have crucified the Lord of glory. Now this is making, by analogy, built upon the assumption that everybody knows about the collective guilt of the Jews and the collective curse of the Jews, for effect, by analogy, that it would seem, it's creating a likeness in which, it creates an image in our mind that we are just as fallen and just as wicked in our own sins as the perfidious Jews whenever we choose to sin because we know the truth. And that does not negate, that does not disqualify all the counts that you've listed, Catholic State, over and over again of the Church Fathers saying, no, this collective curse lasts until this day, and they're,
right,
the sons of iniquity and the enemy of the Church. And
to go. I'm sorry. I just want a quick point. What he's doing here, it's the same thing Trent Horn did recently in his article that I made a video on. Mm-hmm. But what he's doing here is he's making a false dilemma, right? Which is fallacious. Okay. But the false dilemma here is that, well, either the Jews killed Christ or we're all collectively guilty per the Roman Catechism. And that's a false dilemma. That's an either or proposition that's adverse, that is completely opposite to what the church teaches. The church actually teaches a both and. The church teaches it is the case that the Jews did kill him and they cursed themselves for killing him, and that's why they brought the blood curse upon themselves and got dispersed and everything like we're talking about. And the church also does teach this, that we are collective, we are responsible. This is why Jesus Christ came, was incarnated in the first place, to wash away our sins through his suffering, death, and resurrection, right? So this is true that this is church teaching, but what he's doing is he's subtly making a false dilemma, saying, well, it can only be one or the other, right? But that's not church teaching. And moreover, there's even other additional teachings that go along with this as well. Like, for instance, like it is also the case, in addition to both of these, that God himself, being in eternity outside of time, made the decision to have his only begotten son incarnate for the death of everybody. So in a sense, God decided that Jesus Christ would die, right? God decided it. Jesus Christ did die for our sins, and the Jews killed him. So all these things are true. There is no you have to believe one or the other. This is how Protestants think. This is this either or, like, you can't have both faith and works. You have to have one or the other. No, you can't have both. That's a false dilemma.
Great point there. And I want to say that the in a temporal and political sense, the Jews are guilty because they continuously deny Christ's messiahship.
Yes.
That's important to recognize and to hold
It's
over top of all these other
yes.
arguments, and
Yes.
to say, who is the, what social group is trying to most undermine and obviously erect their own Messiah, as he even goes on to admit here toward the end, which I hope we have time to get to. I know you have limited time, Catholic State. So I want to make one more point here. If you have to hop off, or how are you on time right now?
A few more minutes, probably about 7 minutes or so.
Okay, great. Just let me know when you get off. But to your point earlier about this sort of artificial dilemma of states and nations, the natural rights of nations versus states. He goes on to say here, states are like parents. Just because they fail to practice the true religion, this doesn't deprive them of legitimacy, except, as it were, in retrospect, whatever that means. As a result, one can ask about the rights and wrongs of their actions, even if many of their quarrels and problems be resolved, the universal feeling of the first commandment. So here he is. He's conflating state and nation and saying that, yes, the state of Israel is justified as a parent of its people, and just totally disregards the entire, expulsion of the Jews. And the Jews is doctrine of the witness people of St. Augustine in one swoop there. And then he goes on to say, and this connects back to what Doug was saying earlier about, the seed lines. He says, the terms in which the Israeli-Palestinian dispute is expressed in Western media are largely secular, but behind this are two religious imperatives. So here we are. We're kind of oscillating between, is it a secular state? Is it a religious state? Are we supporting a religion, or are we supporting a nation? We can kind of go back and forth infinitely here in order to deflect certain arguments. Were one Jewish of whatever confession or lack thereof, it is hard to believe one would not rejoice to see the entire biblical Holy Land back under the dominion of the descendants of Jacob. So here he's denying that the church is the descendants of Jacob and the true Israel.
Right. Yeah, absolutely he is.
And then a point that Doug has brought up recently in one of these unreviewed articles that he's recommended is how one of these strategies that they use is to invert evidence. Is to take a body of evidence which clearly demonstrates a certain truth and claim that it proves the exact opposite. So he says here, Muhammad did not even claim to have worked any public miracles. The truth of his revelation is supposedly demonstrated by the victory in battle of his followers. So that's exactly what Judaism does. That's exactly what their claims are. It's because they've returned to the Holy Land and they've set up a nation state there, and they have dominion over all the goyim and all the nations of the world. That proves their messianic mission. So he's taking that and placing it upon Islam, which, as we know, was a religion created by the synagogue in the 6th and 7th century to echo their sort of temple cult and this Noahide religion as a kind of broom against Christianity.
Right.
So, yeah, Doug, did you have anything to say there?
No, I mean, I always ask people, part of what I've done here is I think to kind of get the cosmic conspiracy, it took me a few years to realize you need at least an average intelligence. Some people can't get it, but just average. And right now it's just out in the open. That video, who was there just filming themselves, smiling away rigging up the buildings there on the two tall buildings. Who was doing it? I mean, you can't just make all this information and pretend like you can just go with the TV world of the people that have had monopoly of the press for the last several hundred centuries and just say, well, they did that, and just accept every event at face value. And you say, well, okay, so what am I supposed to do? Just say, just become a conspiracy theorist? Well, you have to start balancing this. There is a cosmic conspiracy, and you have to have some basic eyes to kind of see this stuff. Otherwise, what the synagogue is going to say, come on, line up for your next booster. And, your family's dropping around all around you. And what are you going to say? Like, ooh, like someone takes the shot, they drop dead. It's like, are you one of those theorists or something? Anyway, I don't know why this goes for me. If they were wrong about that, if they were wrong and they didn't speak up about COVID, if they're not speaking up about the Ukraine, if they're telling you to look the other way right now during this genocide that the ICC and the ICJ said just breaks nobody's seen anything like this in terms of criminality. And yet our own political system, the Republicans in the Senate, are just going to go there and actually act like mobsters and say, on behalf of these guys, forget our country, forget our borders, forget our streets, our homeless. We're going to spend any amount of money and bankrupt our children because that's who we serve. They're putting it in front of your face. So when you just sort of get carried away in these guys' little pedantics here, come on. This is ridiculous. I think that these kind of people, and as far as the Catholic influencers that aren't going to get on board, I have no interest in speaking to you either. I don't care what happens to this thing. I'll go over and develop a community with you all on locals, because I don't want to yoke myself with you that don't want to have eyes to see as tyranny is falling around us in biblical proportions, and you want to blow it up and just chuckle away and not talk about the spiritual dimension of what's going on right now and the conspiracy against God and man and the Catholic Church. And if you're not opposed to this, you are partaking in this, and you will be part of the egregore of the Catholic Church, and you will submit yourself to the Noahide laws if you're still around. And this stuff we don't have to talk about biblical timelines. The tyranny in the real actual world is getting rolled out. Sorry to blackpill y'all. This is what 2030 is all about. This stuff is coming fast and furious. And I'm not telling you with the spirit of fear. That's why I'm going to start to read from the martyrs. And when the martyrs got dragged down the main drag of Nagasaki, they were glowing, and the people were puzzled by them. Some people just jumped in line and said, whatever this is. And that's the mindset that I'm trying to get us into, not somebody that just repeats a model of the worldly simulacrum and then puts a little bit of Catholic veneer on it to capture an audience. Okay, I'm sorry, I went off.
That's fine. That was good. Can since I got to leave, can I just say
absolutely. Go for it.
Okay. So yeah, everything Doug just said is right. And I think you're doing the right thing with creating a locals channel, just because I'm actually suspended on YouTube, I think until tomorrow or Thursday, but suspended again. So I probably won't be on YouTube that much longer. So if you want to find me on thecatholicstate.com or christtheking.info. Those are both, go to my website and you'll see all my video channels and articles and stuff from there. But I want to leave you with one last quote, because like I said, everything we're saying here is perennial Catholic teaching. Even in the 20th century, they were saying it. So I'm going to read a quote from Pope St. Pius X before I leave. And he was talking to Theodore Herzl, who was the godfather of the Zionist movement. And Herzl went to Pope St. Pius X because he wanted to get his blessing for the new Zionist movement and everything. And this is what Pope St. Pius X said to Herzl in 1904. Quote, this is Pope Pius X. We cannot give approval to this movement. We cannot prevent the Jews from going to Jerusalem, but we can never sanction it. The earth of Jerusalem, if it was not always holy, has been made holy by the life of Jesus Christ. I, as the head of the church, cannot possibly say otherwise. The Jews have not recognized our Lord, and they still don't. We therefore cannot recognize the Jewish people, unquote. We can't recognize the state of Israel. To us, that's an illegitimate state. And that's the last thing I'm going to say. Thank you guys for having me on the show. God bless.
And we'll make sure, yep, thank you for showing up. And we're going to make sure to put your links at the bottom in the description section. Thank you. We appreciate
Thank you so much.
And
Well
the
done.
work you do.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I had to duck out for a second, but yeah, if you want to continue on a little bit more, I have a few more points here. I think that are going to tee you off, Doug, and you'll have a lot to say about it. Is that okay?
Yeah, I'm going to try not to get teed off. My blood pressure's already gone up.
Why stop now? All right.
I would throw this on locals, and this is how we're going to do this in the future. And I'm really going to save myself for the people that want to get over there. We're going to build a community together. We're going to share information. I'm going to be able to be more groups one-on-one. I decided either to not do this anymore because the whole thing's becoming so BS, the whole community. Or I'm just going to go whole hog and do locals and throw myself into it and really build a community. So I'm going to do the locals, and that's what I'm building toward. So go ahead, Will.
So get your barf bag ready. This is total upside down world. One really can't do anything other than wage war against an enemy with the aims of Hamas after an attack like October 7th. So let's just unpack that there. Hamas is a terrorist group that was created by the IDF and the Mossad. October 7th could not have happened without the complicity and participation of the IDF. The reaction times, the security system breaches, they could not happen without willful negligence on the part of the Israeli Defense Forces.
Real quick, this is provable facts from the press inside of the state of Israel that they knew about this more than a year in advance. Multiple sources. They knew about this more than a year in advance. Okay. Number two, the reaction time, which should have been seconds, took 6, 8 hours, whatever it was, 5 hours. I'll be generous. Of the people killed, I'll be generous and say 50%, but some people have said 90. It's the forensic evidence that of the people that were killed, like bullets coming in from helicopters, it's IDF. So you just take that part of it alone. That's factual. That's been reported. That just taking this story at face value from their press, which dominates and has a monopoly over the press of the Western world for a long time, because you can't do any work actually looking into this. That's all facts. So everything's fishy. So that was used as an excuse. So every time you just do that and use their lies, and we all know that the press lies now, you don't have any excuse. We just showed you the footage of, of the buildings. And anyway, yes. So at the very least, and they scheduled a rave the morning before to be there. I mean, jeepers creepers. Okay, so there's a problem there. So when you start using arguments like this, it's a little bit beyond disingenuous at this point. And
right.
Yeah, go ahead.
And the sophistry is obvious when he says one really can't do anything other than, and obviously we can see that, telling you what to think without presenting evidence. The Israelis do seem to have taken extraordinary measures to minimize civilian casualties. Britain, France, and the USA have never gone to such lengths. Only a few days ago, the UN had to admit they had massively overstated civilian casualties in Gaza through relying on the statistics from Hamas.
This is just lies. This guy, who you all are, whoever's listening to this guy, and he's a doctor something, and he is lying, bald-faced lying. He knows that's not true. He's lying to you. He's a liar, period. I'm going to shut up.
Yeah, that's just
that
absolute
equivocation of us and other powers. This is unprecedented what's going on. And when you actually have the stomach to look in there, they're not just killing these people, they're torturing them in sick ways. And their organs are missing and their bodies are deformed in sickening ways that's reminiscent of 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if like your news outlets are just a direct feed from Ben Shapiro, you might be able to maintain this reality. But, we live in the age of mass media, social media. You can find this very quickly on Twitter. Hospitals, as I've already said, refugee camps. Isn't that a violation of international norms there to bomb refugee camps, people who are trying to flee an area, bombing civilian territories. Oh, well, there's terrorist cells buried underneath this hospital. Therefore, we have to bomb it with the children still inside. So anyway, I'm going to go on a little bit more here. The last point I want to leave with is just this blatant inversion that you can almost imagine him getting out his tracing board and drawing the hexagram. And, it's, as you alluded to earlier, contradiction is the point. They're trying to get you into a state of contradiction. And that's what I believe there's a Hannah Arendt quote about that, right? About how totalitarianism tries to suspend reality through contradiction. And that's the mystical meaning. That's the mystical meaning of the hexagram. It's the unity of opposites. And that's the secret behind Kabbalah, is creating the world through language and uniting the opposites so that we enter into a kind of constant state of contradiction. So he says here, various peculiar evangelical Protestants in the USA have got it into their head that the second coming will not occur until the Jewish temple in Jerusalem is rebuilt. They may be right about this. See 2 Thessalonians 2:4. However, they have drawn the conclusion from this that they ought to labor to rebuild it. Isn't the name of this article? What was the name of this article again? Why we should support the Israelis and the Palestinian conflict? Effectively constructing a throne for the Antichrist. The logic behind this is very odd. Why don't they go the whole hog and start branding people with the number of the mark of the beast? Ha ha ha. The mystical and Eucharistic body of Jesus Christ is the third temple, and his one and all sufficient sacrifice is alone the salvation of the world. Okay, that's true. Given that the return of the Jewish people so this is his retort to that. Given that the return of the Jewish people to Jerusalem would trigger the great apostasy, it would have been hard to desire it before it happened. Isn't that what Vatican II is all about? Now it has happened. And given our dismal failure to protect, convince, and convert our estranged elder brethren these last 2,000 years, perhaps we should make up for lost time and support them in these dark hours. Given that they are prophesied to one day make up the companions of the last Gentile Christians in the final persecution. Where's the difference here? Where's the difference here between what the crazy, peculiar evangelical Protestants believe about helping them rebuild the temple and yoking themselves to their project of world domination and genociding the region and setting up a world headquarters as the Freemasons have dreamed since their inception, and what he's just proposing here, that we need to get behind our Jewish brothers and sisters and pray for their conversion. Their conversion comes after the Antichrist. So any support in the meantime that is not saying, here's what the church has always taught, here's the path toward salvation, there is no salvation except through Jesus Christ, any attempt to build a nation in the Middle East is illicit and will lead to world catastrophe, which obviously is what's happened in the last 75 years. So where's the difference here, Doug? Am I missing something? Isn't he just saying exactly the same thing and claiming that there's a difference?
Yeah, he just did the trick you mentioned, which was in the UNZA review, how it's just like, people are so trained to follow the science and the lab coat, and this guy's got all the accolades. So he's literally telling you something, ha about them, and then saying the exact, it's just this inversion trick that he just did. And I only think you have to have an average IQ, and you have the grace to actually be a believer to see that. All right. But yes, Will, it's insane. It's insane. What I would like you to do, Will, you were telling me, because we talked about how they're conflating back and forth this distinction between between state and nation, that he does that little trick. Talk again. You really nailed it the other day when we were talking about his trick that he's doing between the natural law and the divine law in this, because I think that really is a really salient point that we need to bear in mind right now.
Thank you. Yeah, I tried to state that at the beginning, but I'll try to do it a little more clearly. So he says here at the very beginning, the Jews no longer possess a right in the divine law to the Holy Land. And then he goes on to imply that they do possess a right, according to natural law, to a nation state that just so happens by accidental history to be in the Holy Land. And so what is actually at work here? The way he's framing this, they do not possess a right in divine law to the Holy Land, but that does not exclude a natural right, right? Well, it does exclude, because the proper framing here should be that according to the divine law, the Jews are mandated to be expelled from the Holy Land. So that already supersedes any claim to natural law or natural rights to nationhood. And in fact, they should, like he says, he is correct in saying that they do deserve national existence and security in a sense that the Sicut Judaeus non-tradition, which he omits here, that the church has always taught. But the divine law states that they should be in a state of exile. They should be dispersed throughout all nations. And that is to be a testament to the truth of the prophecies of our Lord Jesus Christ, and that they should, and a call to their conversion. They should see the truth of the prophets, that the prophets testified to Jesus Christ, and that if they didn't accept Jesus Christ, that this would be the consequence. And so what we're doing is we're depriving them of the consequences, and we're yoking ourselves to them.
And just say that phrase right now. When he's trying to conflate these, fundamentally, the divine law supersedes the natural law. So that was his little trick, that he's using this device. And then he said, yes, but you are in this instance leaving the divine law out of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. That's about all I wanted to address here, Doug. There's a couple passages. There's one in particular that I really want to highlight in the other file here just quickly to finish up and hand it back over to you if you have anything else you want to say. That's about all I have for the day.
Okay. No, go ahead. Go for it, Will.
Can you share that Ratzinger file here? There we go. Yeah, this is this essay called A Grace and Vocation Without Remorse that I've been sort of highlighting for a while because I think this is fundamental to this dual covenant theology and how it's being worked out dialectically through the unity of opposites, and that not only do we have to sort of keep in the forefront of our mind the Christian perspective about the covenant, but we also have to keep in mind the Jewish perspective about the covenant and bring these two into dialogue there. And then after that, Christ can be all in all. So it's like we have to give up our blessings in order for them to be able to be brought in. But it's the Jews have to be grafted back in through their own will, through their own recognition of their apostasy and their denial of the truth. So he kind of works out this, and it's impossible to decipher what he actually means here. He's kind of gesturing at things and sort of problematizing certain claims, but it never actually arrives at anything. So I'll spare you, reading all this in detail, but it's basically like the promise of land, I think, is one of the sections that it's really should be highlighted here. This can be downloaded off of the Council for Jewish Christian Relations website, which is the sort of Nostra Aetate inspired group that's affiliated with the Catholic Church. So he says, it's pretty small to see here. Let me see if I can. The promise of land is intended concretely. So he uses the word concretely a lot, which is this Hegelian sense of like how something doesn't actually become concrete or real until it's problematized by its opposite, until it comes into conflict, and conflict kind of refines reality. So like, good can't be good until it's refined by evil and that kind of thing. The promise of land is intended concretely for the children of Abraham as a people existing in history. What does that mean? And so then he goes on to describe like what that means for Christians and how it's a spiritual land and it's a spiritual covenant and it's a spiritual promise. And then he goes through the Jewish case in which it's kind of problematized from this angle and from that. And then, they arrive at Zionism, and then Zionism becomes a reality after the Shoah. And, but it's unthinkable for the church to recognize, Israel as a theocratic state, as a fulfillment of the promises of the Old Testament, because that's, which is true. But he does that same sort of trick that Phimister does here. And that's why I'm bringing it up, which he says, according to natural law, though, they do have a right to the land because they have a right to national security. And the Shoah proves that to us, that, if they're just left in the state of exile, then they will be, pogromed and tormented by Gentiles until they're exterminated out of existence, which hasn't happened over 1950 years. And the final point I wanted to get to here is where he ends up. He says, in this way, the Jews have opened the door to God precisely through their scattering in the world. Their diaspora is not merely and not primarily a condition of punishment. Instead, it signifies a mission. What could that mission be? What mission do the Jews have to Gentiles and to Christians, particularly in the church at this point in time?
What their mission? Well, according to hundreds of rabbis I've been viewing, which I'm getting kind of tired of, apparently it's to prepare the world for the Mashiach and the Noahide laws and the program there. Ultimately, I know this sounds a little obvious. It's pretty similar to the Georgia Guidestones that were blown up mysteriously a couple of years ago. It's kind of the plan, I guess. That's the mission. And then they'll be in their seventh year of Sabbath rest, and that's the age. This can also be highlighted in the book from 1934 by Martin Higger called The Jewish Utopia. And so, yeah, it's the playing out of the protocols of the learned elders of Zion. And again, I put sources where we can military intelligence that can also square this on the ground, and especially great papal documents from the last 500 years that all corroborate this cosmic conspiracy against God and man that will bring about the Antichrist. And apparently Benedict is giving a platform for people like the author that you mentioned today to actually let us sort of deny 1,500 years, be dazzled by the fact that I guess he's a doctor or something, and just say, learn to love the bomb or learn to love the Mashiach and the Noahide laws and forget about your fate. They already taught us to suicide Western culture, to suicide the church, to suicide our own nations and our own offspring. And we've learned that just line up, look at the lab coat, shut up, don't think. How dumbed down have you all gotten? Just let the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ shine on you once and just stand up for truth. What else is there? Your life is just not that important. How much longer are you going to live? When you embrace the fullness of truth, you start to see the beatific vision more clearly. And this is just part of that. It's not about hate. It's about understanding what the church has emphasized for so long for the reason that you can see the fullness of faith, the fullness of reality, and embrace it most fully. And when you do that, you embrace truth. And the byproduct of that is the love of Christ. But like one of our guests said on Friday, Christ didn't even say, I am truth. He said, I am love, I am truth. I've come to shed light and love on the world, but you must embrace truth. You must embrace this. Even though the world is saying, look the other way, dare to do it. And I'll say, can you say, Will, the more you embrace this, the more you learn to love reality, the fullness of everything that God's being, what he has for us. Going into an egregore, going into escape world, just taking the little crumbs that the world has to offer. That's God has something better in mind for you all. Once you just kind of open your eyes up to, wait a minute. Okay, so yeah, I guess I did my conclusion right there. I'm going to let you finish now, Will.
Yeah, that's great. It's like an immune system which preserves us against these mimetic devices. And, that's what it seems like is digressing towards in the influencer realm of, the Catholic media spaces toward, what is everybody else saying and how do I sort of contribute to this dialogue and this conversation? And there's a sort of firewall or, there are limits on what can be spoken and said. And that's not true reality. And that's not what the faith is meant to do.
Yes. Well, in immunity against this mimetic contagion, and that's the egregore. And once you allow that into you, it's hard for people to come out of it. So it's best to be immune in the first place, because harder waves and the next little trick. They're setting up the thing in the Middle East, and they know that given time and deliberation, that's what brings rationality onto the human mind collectively and individually. That's why juries deliberate, because it gives they know that there's no time for deliberation, because people are going to start to figure out what they did is demonic over there. That you can't excuse it away anymore. So there's going to be another event. So retroactively, people, what's going on right now will be pretty small. So it's just time to get right with truth. But yeah, mimetic contagion, once you've allowed that contagion, it's that much harder to pull your way against those mind demons. And that's why, even though people kind of know what's going on from 9/11, they still have the residue of that contagion that clouds their minds and clouds their thinking.
Yeah, that's a good point. And, the residual sort of fear quotient, I guess you would call it, in which society doesn't trust itself anymore. Like, I was talking to my wife the other day about, how she was a babysitter when she was 11 years old, and people would let her watch their kids, and, they pick her up at her church, and she couldn't even drive, but she was responsible for, 3-year-olds with, sensitive medical conditions and stuff like that. And then nowadays, like, people need a background check, and, you need to, and there's just not this sense of trust anymore. And I think that's the point of these kind of series of catastrophic events, is that society is sort of dismantled and suicides itself in this sort of fabric of, relations that form that immune system against totalitarian coercion.
They're trying to make us into the material through their technocracy, which was going on here, and we're supposed to be the building materials for their temple. When Christ said that you're supposed to be building materials for our temple, and Kabbalah is about conflating these with all these rhetorical tricks and these mind f's. And so once you can kind of identify them, you can discern the agenda, and you can detach yourselves from their hooks, their tentacles, their attachments and attenuations, and see Ephesians 5:11. Understand the darkness, do not partake of it, but expose it. And that's what we're doing here.
Right. Well, unless you have more, Doug, I think that was a great conversation. I really enjoyed this, and thanks to Catholic State. Hope he enjoyed it as well, and look forward to talking with him in the future. So, anything else you want to say?
No, I want to say thank you for all the time, all the work you've done down the line, and all the work you did putting together this. I think there's people that I'm sure appreciate that out there. So good job, Will.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity, and it's a pleasure always working with you, Dr. Haugen. So God bless you, and let's do it again soon.
All right. All y'all out there, we appreciate you too. People that are new and have hopped on the site, welcome aboard. This has been Dr. Deep State.